thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Bilal. I'm one of the marketing managers at Data Science Dojo. I'm joined here by Susan Walsh. She is founder and managing director at Classification Guru, and she's going to be presenting on between the spreadsheets, classifying and fixing dirty data for data science. So I'll hand it over to her now. And if you have questions, feel free to use Q&A. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much. And hi, everybody. Thank you for joining this session. I'm really excited to be talking to you about between the spreadsheets, classifying and fixing dirty data for data science. If you don't know me, I like to make the topic of data, data science, data cleaning fun. And how do I do that? Well, I do it with things like this. If the buttons work.
When you think of superheroes, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Men in tights? Women with superhuman strength? Capes? Lots of superheroes wear capes, but only one wears a coat. A data coat. By day, she's Susan Walsh, but when dirty data rears its ugly head, she becomes the classification guru. What are the classification guru's superpowers? Consistency, organization, accuracy, and trust. With help from her good friend and trusty sidekick, the data whisperer.
Hi, Scott.
The classification guru wages war against dirty data, fighting her sworn enemies, misclassification, duplicate, and the typonator. It's the classification guru's job to clean up the mean streets of Excel City.
That was bang out of order.
So, when you're in Excel hell, don't let dirty data get you down. Call the classification guru.
So that gives you a little bit of a flavour around what this session is going to be like. And if you're really lucky, there might be another video at the end. Now, what we're going to talk about? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself first, where I came from, what my background is, how I ended up here. Then I'm going to talk about, well, what is dirty data? Because we're all working with different types of dirty data. So let's actually define what some of those might be. And then what are the consequences of that? So we might be, working away in our little data bubbles, and we don't always realize what happens to the data that we produce, or the charts or analytics that we produce that then go on to someone else. So I'm going to talk about what the consequences are there. And then, of course, we're going to have to talk about how we can try and ensure some data accuracy. And, it's not infallible, but we can certainly take steps to help make it better. Secret sauce tips is maintenance of data. So I am going to show you some simple tips and tricks on how to maintain and spot check some data in Excel. It's not a tool that everybody likes, but it's a tool that we all use. So you can take the tips that I give you and you can translate them into whatever methods you're using in your own office. And then I'm going to talk about tools and other options that are available for doing this. And then finally, I'm going to share with you the dirty data maturity model. Now, you might struggle within your organizations to get funding for data or explain to non-data people the issues that you're having with the data. This is something I created to help tackle that challenge. And then, of course, we'll finish off with a summary at the end. And I will check your questions going through, but also we're going to leave some time at the end. Now, there will be some audience participation required, not much, but I will be expecting some answers in the chat. So keep your eyes peeled. But first of all, let's talk about my favorite subject, me. Just kidding. But I think it's really important to explain to you what my background is and where I came from, because it wasn't conventional in the least. I completely fell into data. I had a life as a salesperson for a while. Then I had a women's clothing shop here in Guildford, Surrey. And then that completely failed. And I was so broke that I couldn't even afford to go bankrupt. And I was desperate for a job. So I found an ad online to do some spend data classification for a spend analytics company. And I'd never done that before, but I'd worked for companies. I knew what they were spending their money on. And that's really when I found my love for data and classifying data and spotting patterns in it. But of course, after 5 years there, I wanted to move on and I didn't know where I could get a job doing the same thing. I'm not an analyst, I don't code, I don't build dashboards, but I'm very good at classifying data. And so I decided to set up my own business. And so I'm coming up for my 5-year anniversary now. And in that time, I have worked across all industries, countries, and languages. I have classified and normalized multiple data sets, millions and millions of rows of data. I have built customized taxonomies. I have cleansed suppliers for P2P implementations. I have cleansed the messiest of databases, and I flipping love it. And not only that, I found that I have a unique perspective, having a business background and then partially working in data. And I could see that there wasn't really much in the space talking around cleaning data, classifying data. So I wrote a book. And again, I didn't want it to just be another data book. I wanted it to be a cheeky, fun data book. So it's called Between the Spreadsheets, Classifying and Fixing Dirty Data. And you can find that on Amazon and all other good bookshops if you want to take a peek. It is very much based on this presentation, but goes into obviously a lot more detail. And then I would just like to share with you that this year I was also listed as one of the Data IQ 100 most influential people in data. I'm up there with chief data officers in some of the most well-known companies in the globe. So that was a huge achievement for me to be recognized by my peers. So I feel like I'm qualified to sit here today and talk to you about dirty data. But what is dirty data? Because my idea of it might be very different from yours. So the first thing I'm going to say is it's things like misspelt words, and that could be in descriptions, in names, in anything you can think of. And then, of course, there's incorrect descriptions too. You know, when people have accidentally cut and pasted something, or they can, you know, in the finance procurement world, it's purchase orders and invoices, and people just put random things on the invoice that don't make any sense. It could be product codes or product descriptions, and it could be more causing more of a problem for the business than you realize. It could be missing codes from products or items as well. And then we've got data in the wrong columns. And I don't know about you, but I see this all the time when it comes to addresses. You have the zip code in the city column. You've got the state in the zip code. You've got the country in the zip code. You've got everything in the zip code column apart from the actual zip code. It can get really messy and it can be really cumbersome to actually tidy up. We are in a global world now where businesses are across continents working not in silos anymore, but together. They might have siloed data still, but there are other issues in the UK. You know, we're talking maybe miles, but in Europe it's kilometers. And then we've got liters, and how do you spell liters? Because there's the UK versus the US version. Centimeters, meters, or are we talking something else? It can get really confusing very quickly if we don't have some standardization across our data sets, which also leads to currency issue problems. And I have been there. I have been that person who has calculated the currency wrong and ended up with $500 taxes instead of $50 taxes. So it can be so easily done, but it's having these checks in place to look and help guide you that will prevent the error getting further along in the business process. And then this is my favorite one, formatting issues. So again, we are across the globe, and even within our own departments and companies, we are formatting things completely differently. So what I would love for you to do right now is type into the chat box how you format your date. Is it day, day, month, month, year, year? Is it month, month, day, day, year, year? Are you using dashes, slashes, dots? Are you typing out the months? There are a whole different range. And I think we're about to see them in the chat now. I'm just having a look. Yep, see, we've got them all the different types. And that, what I'm looking at now is exactly what I would expect. Different for every single person. So let's figure out a way to work on that. And everyone's got their own opinion on this as well. There is an ISO format, but nobody seems to want to do that. So many, and I've heard of different formats for different types. So in Excel, it might be one. In a file system, it might be something else. It's I'm loving the discussion going on in the chat already, because this is exactly what happens. Now, as well as these things that we've just talked about, will lead us to our good old friends, the duplicates. And we see so many of these in data, or what I like to call near duplicates, if you're working with, say, names. So you might have Robert Smith and Bob Smith, and maybe even Rob Smith. And guess what? They're actually all the same person, because 3 different people typed in their information into the CRM system. And now we have 3 versions with different bits of information in each record. Happens all the time. Now, in my world of spend data classification, think of it like your own bank statement. You know, there's a supplier name and what you spent some money on, but on a much grander scale and a lot more money. The first thing that I have seen people do is classify LinkedIn, that well-known social networking, training and recruitment site, as a restaurant, because the description said restaurant. What happened in this instance is the person classifying had not looked at the data as a whole in context. You know, looking at one cell, one column or 2 columns is not enough. You need to look at the whole row, the whole data set to get context for what's going on. And also a little bit of common sense wouldn't hurt either. But this happens, and I've seen it happen a few times. I've also seen LinkedIn classified as software. It breaks my heart when I see it, because honestly, it's one of the easiest things to classify. But then also with that comes things like SurveyMonkey. We know we do online surveys, market research. No, someone thinks it's consulting. And this one, it might be a foreign company, but guess what? The name, the hint is in the name. It's Speed Courier, and yet somebody put it as equipment maintenance. And again, Roadrunner Towing, it's not consultancy, they're fixing cars, but it happens all the time. And finally, this is my favorite example, Tinder Corporation. Don't ever assume that you think you know what something is in the data, because it will bite you in the behind. I was classifying for a company in the UK, they're a charity, very highly thought of, and Tinder Corporation came up in their data. And I'm thinking, they can't, no, not that Tinder, no, that can't be right. And then I saw the description, it said data cabling, and I was like, okay, well, that makes more sense. So I did a little bit of Googling and searching and found out that there is a Tinder Corporation Limited here in the UK that is an IT services company. And so the classification was correct on this one. But had we just looked at the supplier name, we would have assumed it was the wrong thing. So again, don't assume, use the context of your data, and it doesn't have to be spend data. It could be product data and product codes. It could be anything you like. There will be patterns in the data that will help guide you when you're looking at it. And it's the same when I do normalization of suppliers, and you might do this as well. I found some Grainger. Now, there's Grainger in the US that is a well-known parts supplier, nuts, bolts, screws, all that kind of hardware. And then there's Grainger in the UK that's a house builder. And I accidentally normalized them all to the same thing. And so again, had I had the context of the full set of data, I would have known that there were 2 different companies. I've obviously learnt my lesson now. This was a very long time ago, but again, it just proves, never assume, always use the context of the data, and that will really help guide you to know if it's right or wrong. And of course, you know, it's easy for me to show you a couple of examples that stick out like a sore thumb, but when you're looking at rows and rows of data in an Excel file or a table in Click or Tableau or Power BI, how are you going to be able to spot those things that stick out? Well, fear not, I've got some tips for you later, so you'll be able to take those away and practice those afterwards. How can we prevent this kind of thing? Well, again, like I said, you cannot assume that you know something. Always double check, use the context. If it's classification, look at the name of the vendor and the description. It could be if you're selling something, what's the name of the supplier and what are you selling to them? There could be instances where you're selling something to a supplier that you're not supposed to. So it's really important to know that. And then think about, well, looking for buy or sell this product to this person or this service. Does this seem reasonable? And if not, then, look at the values, see if they help you guide in hotel classification, for example. You might have spend of $50,000. That's not hotel rooms, that's venue hire for an event. So you need to just know that, there's things that can be different, but if you're working with your data regularly, that will help you. And you know what? Google, they say Google is a skill now. I am all for that. I'm the queen of Google. There's not much I cannot find for you. Always just double check. It could save you so much time in the long run. And spot check your data. If you're using it this month and it's great, it's fine, it's perfect, wonderful. When you go back next month, it might not be perfect anymore. Someone might have done something to it. So always just spot check to make sure it still looks okay. And why should we bother? Well, this one's popped up first. Wasted money. It really is. You're going to spend less time fixing dirty data. Who in the chat is just a yes, is having to fix dirty data at the moment? Yeah, see, you could save yourself so much time. I'm going to give you some tips. Yeah, I feel for you. I love it, but I get paid to do it. I'm guessing you guys is probably not what you signed up for. Also, it's costly to rectify. I mean, you might have to get someone else in and it costs even more than the initial project. It affects decision-making processes as well. Businesses are making decision on this data. If it's wrong, that could affect multiple things within the business, including bonuses, headcount, the future of the business and the direction that it's going to take. Things like, imagine clean data going into your models. You wouldn't have to rerun them because something was wrong and you didn't know what it was and you had to check and it was the dirty data. Imagine that bliss that will never happen, but we can make it easier. Maybe you can run it fewer times. And then things like privacy laws, and we might not often think about that, but if we've got dirty data within people's names and addresses, that can be against the law. And then you could be subject to legal action and things like that, which leads to reputational damage. So that can be harder to come back from than paying a fine or paying someone to fix your data. And let's face it, dirty data makes your life more difficult, makes all of our lives more difficult. Keeps me in business. I'm very thankful for that. But, I dream of a world where you don't need me anymore. These are all quite negative things. And, I'm quite a positive person. So I want to end with the fact that actually, you know what? We should bother because it could increase profitability. And obviously you might think, well, why that doesn't help me, that helps the business, but it could help you if you get a better bonus or a promotion. If you're spending less time on a project, but the client, your company is still billing your client the same amount of money, then they've saved time and your time and money. So why not do it? And then there's the consequences of it. So what actually happens? Well, there could be cost savings. That would be nice if you fixed it, or you could cost losses. You could improve your business negotiations. They might not be so great right now. You might have multiple product codes, SKUs, SKUs, various different versions of the same thing. It can help with your forecasting, your budgets, targeting the right customers. If you've got a CRM system full of dirty data, are you mailing stuff out to someone who doesn't even live at that address or exist? Because I bet that happens more than you think. And the cost of the postage, the printing of the materials, etc., it all adds up. And even things like shipping the correct products. I heard a story that someone had set the dimensions of a TV, like a 40-inch TV, to 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. And so when they were doing the loading plans, the computer thought it could fit hundreds of these TVs onto a truck. And of course, the reality was very different. That can lead to things like, well, deliveries being missed. You can get penalized for that from certain retailers. All kinds of things can happen. You know, there might not be enough space in the warehouse. It just goes on and on and on. And then it affects analytics as well. So here are some unnormalized suppliers. Obviously, you know, you can see there's quite a few of the same companies here. They're just spelled different ways depending on which region or you're in. And they have a certain amount of value associated with them, but this could be units, this could be things sold, things bought, it could be anything. When you normalize it, suddenly you find that you've actually only got 4 suppliers, and that spend with PwC is a lot higher than you thought it was. So there are real benefits of having that data clean and tidy, and you can really see what's going on. And again, it's those things of saving yourself time. You know, that's the most important thing. And, you know, I'm preaching to the converted here when it comes to technology implementation and AI. You know, data cleansing is very often neglected. People within organizations who are decision makers really don't seem to see the value in investing in cleaning your data straight up. For a small fee up front, you could have a nice clean data set, you can implement it, and things will run fairly smoothly. If you don't clean it, nothing works, the project takes longer, you spend more time on it, and it costs 2-3 times as much. It just doesn't make sense to me. And that's one of my lifelong ambitions, is to change that mindset from the decision makers at the top. You know, generally, these errors are only found post-implementation if it's some kind of software, and you find that staff lose faith in that data or the tool. They become disengaged, they claim it doesn't work, they don't trust it because it's wrong, and they all go back to their siloed spreadsheets. And then it costs a lot of money to fix, a lot of money. And even then, you know, there's no guarantee that your staff will adopt that technology again. You may well end up having to abandon the project. And I have heard of projects and instances where millions and millions of dollars have been thrown at a project and it's been abandoned. It's crazy. Then our good old friends, AI, machine learning and automation. You have to clean and prepare that data beforehand. It's just so important. Your AI is learning from training data sets. Where are your training data sets coming from? Do you know the source? Have you checked it? Do you know the data that you're working with? Are you familiar with it? Would you know if it was wrong? They're all really important questions to think about when you're working with it, because just taking your time to familiarize yourself with that data, even for an hour before running something, could really help you improve your models and save you some time. Same with things like machine learning and coding. You know, it's based on rules from data, but if you're looking at incorrect data, it's just going to breed more bad rules and cause you more problems. And it really is true what they say, the old adage of, I guess in the UK, we say rubbish in or garbage in, and rubbish out, garbage out. That will not change. And I like to think of myself as the trash lady of the data world. You know, it's a job that nobody wants to do, but it has to be done because everything would be in chaos if it didn't get done. Now, let's talk about ensuring your data accuracy. That's quite a bold statement. I'm not saying that you could 100% do that. However, we can definitely take steps to improve it. And the first thing that you need to know is there is no quick fix. There is no magic button. There is no software in the world that is going to solve all your problems. You will have to review data yourself or someone else at some point. And get the organization involved. It's not just data people's responsibility to manage data. There are people who do not work in data who are inputting data on a daily basis, and they also need to understand the impact and the consequences of what happens if they don't get it right and how it affects their colleagues. And get everybody to agree some common standards, processes, terms, procedures, dates, all those good things, because it will make it so much easier. And then, don't just leave it once it's fixed. You have to keep it and maintain it and refresh it and update it constantly. And like I was saying earlier, spot check it too, because that data you worked with last month that was correct, it might not be right in another month's time because someone's accidentally deleted something, or they've cut and pasted over something, or they just have a different opinion about what it could be. But it's hard to get people to come on this journey if they don't work in data. And so I created a philosophy that everybody can remember and everyone can work with to try and help with better data accuracy. And that's about making sure that your data has its coat on. So the first thing is C, consistent data, consistent standards, consistent terms, consistent processes. Make sure everybody's on the same page, doing things the same way to minimize those errors. And then make sure it's organized. So think of your closet. You just throw a top in there and then you go back to get it the next week and it's all creased and you can't find it. You've got to rummage through. If you'd hung it up nicely in order with all your other tops by color, you could have just gone in, pulled it out, wouldn't have to iron it, and off you go. Data is exactly the same as that. Categorize it into things like departments, regions, divisions, category by spend if you want. Have that in place so that whenever someone comes up to you and goes, oh, how much did we sell in the UK last year? You've got it all categorized and labeled already, so you can just quickly pull something off. You're not spending 2 days trying to pull a whole load of spreadsheets together. It would save yourself so much time. And of course, it has to be accurate, or as accurate as you can get it, so that people eventually, once you have your consistency, your organized data, your accurate data, you have your trustworthy data, you want to know that when you are generating some AI new models, or you're doing dashboards or analytics for your business, that when you give them that data, it's the best it can be. You're really confident in it. You don't want them to have any doubts about the accuracy of the data when they're interrogating the numbers or anything like that. So that's all great in theory, but what about the practical bits of it, Susan? What are you going to do about that? Well, I'm going to show you some tips that I use and that will hopefully help you with whatever kind of data you're working with. When you get the output, it's just visual checks. Sometimes you just need to do a visual check. There's no other way around it. And again, it comes down to knowing the data, understanding it, and being familiar with it. That will all help and make it easier for you. So first of all, I'm going to say, it's Excel. It is by no means an option. However, it is an option, and we're all using different tools. So it's the common one that I can show you my process in. You can take this away and adapt it to however you're working. So the first thing I've done is I've done a pivot table. And in this instance, I've got my normalized supplier and I've got my categorization. But it looks a bit rubbish, so I need to put it into a tabular form. And then I want to take all the subtotals off because I'm not interested in those. And then I can start to scroll for anything that doesn't look right. So in this instance, we've got Dell. We all know Dell, that IT computer company. What they are not is a courier service or company. And this often happens in spent data classification. You get a number of items on an invoice list, and one might be laptop and then printer, monitor, and then you'll have the carriage or delivery charge as a line on the invoice. If people are not paying attention when they classify, or if they're using some kind of automation, AI, ML, and they've just searched for delivery in the description, and it automatically gets classified as delivery, they've not used the context of the data to help them. So in this instance, they're not paying Dell for a courier service. They're paying Dell for a laptop, and the delivery charge just happens to be part of the cost of the laptop. So hopefully that makes sense. But you can't just blindly use keywords and auto classify them, because there can be context involved. That's basically what I'm saying. Then it's really hard to flip between the tabs when you're working with Excel. So I have used this process. I click on new window, I select arrange all, and then I have them vertically. So they'll be side by side. And what that means is that I can have my pivot table on one side, and I can have my raw data on the other. And what I can start to do is methodically go down the pivot table with the aggregated data and start to look at anything that's not right and change it in the raw data tab. And then as I'm going down, I would then refresh all. And I've got a question I can see. It does not scale well. I will cover a little bit off about that later on. There is something you can do. If you've got it aggregated, it helps. As I say, it's not foolproof. I do admit that. You can also add in extra layers of data too. So I might want to look at supplier and description. For you, that might be customer and item sold, or product and product code. It could be a number of different things. And again, just keep scrolling, looking for anything. And you can also flip it as well. So in this instance, you could look at categories first and then look for any suppliers that stick out that shouldn't be in that category. And I didn't put it in there, so I'll just tell you now. The other thing that you can do to scale when you have large data sets is you can check them or chop up the data if you've categorized it. Like I was saying, if it's all organized, you could look at it, but do it by country, you could do it by division, you could do it by product group. You could do it by department, so sales and marketing, then finance, then procurement, then IT. Group similar things together. I have a tool I use that I use in a different way, and I'll go on to that. But if you just need something quick that you need to look at, then pivot tables are your way to go. So there are other tools. You could take what I've shown you and you could do that in BI. You could do that in Tableau. You could have aggregated tables. The difference is I use the tool called Omniscope, which is at the bottom. That's a visualization and data modeling tool in one. So I can actually aggregate my data at the top and have an editable table at the bottom, and I can fix my data live in real time. So that's how I get around it. It can also handle millions of rows of data. So that's the way I work generally. You will find a way, but it just gives you an idea of different ways that you could spot check your data. You could do keyword searches in the supplier name, the description name, the product description name. If it's numbers, you might want to check that it's within a range, that there's not too many extra zeros, etc. if you haven't already thought of putting some safeguards in place. So there's lots of different things you could think about, just depending on the type of data that you're working with. If it was, say, manufacturing, and you wanted to manufacture like 1,000 products, and you knew that you only made 1,000 or sold 1,000 in a year, but someone had put 10,000 in, then there's a red flag for you straight away. But again, the key is looking at it, getting to know it, familiarizing yourself with it. And then I promised you the dirty data maturity model. So this comes from my book, Between the Spreadsheets. This, along with the data horror stories chapter, is a favorite of a lot of people. That is real life anonymously donated data horror stories that have happened to them. So like I said, it can be really hard as data people to explain to the rest of the business the issues that we have. So I created this dirty data maturity model as a bit of fun, interesting, and a really simple visualization to get people to actually look at things. So, data. And I describe this as the equivalent of turning your underwear inside out to wear it for one more day. You know that you shouldn't do it, but you think you can get away with it for one more day. And then what happens? You have an accident and you end up at the hospital and you get found out. Dirty data is pretty much like that. You know it's there, you know it's a problem, but you'll fix it another day. And then that day that you go to fix it never comes because some massive disaster has happened. So trying to get on top of it from the start is a really good plan, even if it's just small steps, doing something towards checking it regularly, getting people who are inputting it to understand the importance of accuracy. All those things are small steps that can help you. And then you've got D-class data. So at this point, you know, we're maybe got a few rules and procedures in place. We're maybe checking a few things, but it's still pretty unstructured and a bit random, and we're just hoping for the best. At this point, you might not even have anything more than Excel as a tool. But distributed data. So at this point, it's slightly more organized. There is a structure to it. We might have some tools. We might even be doing some analytics on it. Who knows? It's starting to look like it's more manageable. And then it becomes disordered data. So we go to the next steps. We have the tools. We're just not using them regularly. We're not cleaning the data, checking it properly. It's in there, but it's just not in the right order. What we're really aiming for is the pinnacle, and that is dirt-free data. And quite honestly, this is the hardest stage to be at, because once you're up there, you have to work really hard to keep it up there. You've got well-trained staff, you're using the right tools, you're using automation, you are checking, you are spot checking, you're maintaining, you are doing all the things you're supposed to be doing. And yet people are still making mistakes and you're still having to fix them, but at least there are a lot less of them and you have the tools in place to actually go and fix them. So that is the dirty data maturity model. Feel free to share that with your organization and say, look, we're here and we need to get to here. Visually, people get that. People get dirty laundry. So that's been my whistle-stop tour of Between the Spreadsheets, classifying and fixing dirty data. What we've talked about today is basically there are no shortcuts. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. You have to put in some manual work to get that data right. And you have to know and maintain your data. But by knowing and maintaining your data, it makes everything else so much easier for you to spot those things. And then you've got to agree those common standards. I mean, I've heard, you know, that a customer within an organization can be different things in different departments. You might have internal customers, external customers. It can mean a whole range of things. So define what that is. Define your dates, define your units of measure. Otherwise, you're going to end up with multiple versions of the same thing. And get everybody involved. I know as data creatures, we are not the most extroverted of people, apart from myself, obviously, kind of an exception to the rule, but talk to other people. You know, if you know that someone is doing something in another department and you're spending 2 hours a week fixing it, go talk to them, show them the consequences of their work, let them understand, and then maybe they'll do something to change what they're doing at the point of input. Make it more human and make it more kind of what's my impact on other people. And of course, I'm going to say again and again and again, make sure your data has its coat on. And if you need a little reminder of that, here we go.
Are you leaving your data out in the cold? You wouldn't go out into sub-zero temperatures without the correct protection, so why do so many companies forget to protect their data? Unprotected data can lead to bad business decisions that cost money and put jobs at risk. That's why your data needs its coat on. This means making sure your data is consistent, organized, accurate, and trustworthy. Consistent means using the same standards, terms, and classifications company-wide. Organized data makes it easier to find. Think of it like a messy closet. It can be difficult to find what you're after, even when you know it's in there. When organized correctly, it becomes easier to find what we want. Data should be accurate, which can mean different things to different people, but at its most basic level, accurate data is correct. And finally, data should be trustworthy. This is critical. If your team can't trust the data, they might not use it. And business decisions around jobs, staffing, and budgets are all based on data, so it's got to be right. Like any code, there are differences in the quality of data services out there. If you buy a cheat code, it might not be waterproof or protect you enough, and it won't last more than one season. If you don't invest in good quality data services, you will end up paying twice as much, if not more in the long run, to fix the earlier mistakes. If you'd like to speak to an expert about data in your own business, visit theclassificationguru.com to find out more.
And that has been me. I am very active on LinkedIn. That is my QR code. If you scan that now, you'll be able to connect with me. Very much post content very similar to what you've just experienced. I hope that has been enjoyable and informative for you. I'd love to answer some questions. And also, once we've done that, have a think about if you've got any data horror stories of your own that you'd like to share, or any problems that you might have that you might like a bit of advice about. So let's do that now. So I can see there's one question in the Q&A, and that is, will the slide deck be available? I can share that. I don't know how they would get that out to you. Otherwise, you can contact me on LinkedIn and I can send that to you. That's the other option.
Yeah, we'll make it available on the recording. Once this webinar is finished, we'll have a recording available on YouTube, and on our social media we'll include the link to the slide deck.
Perfect. I've also just seen a question around tips on data formatting. Honestly, the best tip I can give you is just choose a format and get everyone to use it. Because if you want to change it at a later date to something else, if it's all the same, it's super easy to change it all. If you have multiple date formats, trying to change them is an absolute nightmare. I know from my point of view that we are based here in the UK, but we have US clients, and every time we open a CSV file, it corrupts the dates. One of my team has had to change his PC settings or laptop settings to the US so that when we open files, we don't completely ruin the date format. So that's, and again, it's that consistency thing. It's the same with classification. If it's all wrong, it's much easier to change because you just do it once. If it's in bits and bobs, then it takes forever to go through and change everything. And let's have a look. What else can I see here? We've got, even after creating glossary or agreeing terms and definition to keep the record consistent, how do you make sure that people are choosing the right option for a field? Just so training and stating any other ways. Oh, that's a good one, because people love to just click that first box down, don't they? I think that's one of the data horror stories in my book, actually. Everyone was just choosing the first option. There's two answers to this. It depends on who the user is. If it's within your organization, then you've got training. You can, like I say, you could show them the consequences further down the organization, what happens when they don't tick select the right box. So that's a way of making them understand how important it is. You could even maybe do like league tables, if you can track it, like which department has got the best accuracy, or which person has got the best accuracy each month. Give them a little prize. Unfortunately, if you're dealing with the general public, then you have got no chance, my friend. They will do what they want. And I have absolutely no idea how you could win them over. It's a thankless and challenging task. So normalization, we've got a question, is it ideal to normalize during cleaning? I normalize before I do anything else with my data sets. The reason being, I see a lot of things like IBM, I.B.M, IBM Inc., IBM Limited, or PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, P.W.C, etc. By creating a new column and normalizing it all to the same company, suddenly, instead of maybe 10,000 suppliers, I've got 7,000 because I've normalized them. That means I've got 3,000 less suppliers to classify. So that's saved me a whole chunk of time already. So that's why I would always do it at the start. It's a really helpful tool, and you can do it not just with names, but with product groups. You know, oh, how many screws have we manufactured this month? How many nails have we made? Or how many toilet rolls have we sold? By grouping it all together or normalizing it, it's much easier. And oh, what does it mean to normalize? That is a great question. So it's a grouping of standard names or terms or things. So we talked about IBM, I.B.M, IBM Inc. I would group them all together as IBM in a new column. So rather than having 5 different versions of IBM that I'd have to individually classify, I could just have one version and classify everything at once. And then another reason is things like you get Hilton Hotel or the Hilton Hotel. By normalizing it, taking out the, you get to see a truer picture of how much you're spending, how much you're selling, how much you're using, etc. In terms of normalizing product groups, you could do it. So say it was clothing, for example, you could normalize all the jackets to jackets, all the trousers to trousers. And, you know, trousers could be called pants, cargo pants, safety pants, all those kinds of things. You can normalize them all to just pants, just so that you know how much we've used, we've sold, we've bought, etc. So hopefully that answers your question. And I think that is all the questions. So I am going to put it out to you guys now. Have you got any data stories to share? Or are you all going to go quiet on me now? Oh, look at that. They've all gone quiet. They don't want to admit. They're all going to pretend that their data's perfect. I'm just kidding. But I did do a session at an event the other week, and I asked all the senior data people to put their hands up if they had problems with their data, and nobody wanted to put their hand up. This is something I see in my life all the time. Like everyone has data problems, but nobody wants to admit they've got problems, not publicly anyway. Let's see. Yeah, unfortunately, using data fraudulently happens. Again, as long as you're being careful and you don't get into trouble, that's a tough one. Oh, Mel, all your data cleaning escapades so far have been assignments in your class. That scares me because they've probably gone easy on you when you get into the real world. It's chaos. That's what I've heard. I'm wishing you well. So someone has got reformatting the column of physician names that are formatted in 3 different ways. First, last, last. Yep. That is an absolute nightmare. Again, you kind of have to try and break it up. I can't think without visually seeing what you could do with that. I have a few ideas, but I think it's quite a manual process. I don't think there's a quick way around that one, unfortunately. Could you use natural language understanding techniques to understand semantics? Absolutely. And I genuinely believe that in different areas, this works a lot better than others. So things like nuts, bolts, and screws, clothing, very good. In the procurement world, where I might have a description that says a taxi from the hotel to the restaurant, you have to be really clear about, is it a hotel, a taxi, or a restaurant? So it's a bit more complicated. Or again, the context of what the spend might be. Sometimes you see the word cleaning in the description and you would automatically assume that that is janitorial cleaning. But sometimes it's IT computer cleaning. So, you have to know the supplier name to be able to know that. So it can be very subjective, the area that I work in, but there are other areas where it's much more effective. And then what's the best use of tool for visualization? I don't think there's one best tool. I think it really depends on what you need, what your objectives are, and what you get on with, because everybody kind of naturally finds something that they work better with. So as long as it can give you the results that you're looking for, it's the one that works best for you. And most of them you can get a free trial. So I'd highly recommend, testing things out if you can. What a great question. What is the best experience through my career? I could not have imagined 5 years ago when I started this that I would be sitting here talking to you now, doing a webinar. I'm going to Helsinki to talk at an event next week, and I'm flying out to Canada later in the year to talk at another event, and then Las Vegas later in the year. That was never in my plans. I could never have imagined that people would want to listen to what I have to say. I mean, for a while when I first started out, I felt like a complete fraud because I didn't sit in the data world and I didn't sit in the procurement world either, but I had this very specific knowledge that kind of straddles both worlds. And I've kind of learned to own that. Getting the Data IQ 100 was really great. And also writing the book, because I'm not a great reader. I don't really enjoy reading. And so for me to write a book was pretty huge. So yeah, it's just this whole last 5 years has been so challenging and so tough, but also so rewarding. I mean, there's been a couple of times where I've nearly had to give up the business. But sitting here today talking to you, it's been so worth it. And that's what I would say, especially if you're starting out. Like at the start of this data journey, I started at the very, very bottom and worked my way up. And because of that, I know all the aspects of it and I see how it all fits in. And it gives me a really great perspective. So be patient and just learn your craft. And the other thing is, because I felt like, I don't code and all that things, I could have tried to do all that and be mediocre at it. But what I did instead was I focused in on the things I was really good at and made them better. And I let someone else do coding and all that kind of stuff. I focused in on the things that I'm really good at and that I really enjoy. So that would be my advice. Look at that. Someone is doing Subway. Well, before that, there's so many cool multiple databases. Yeah. I see multiple databases with different names, different date formats, all that good stuff. My book is on ebooks, but I don't know about Apple. I'd have to speak to the publisher about that. Someone's been through a data migration process from 3 different legacy systems. Yep, I did a CRM system. I pulled together 28 different data sources there was 80,000 records, and we managed to deduplicate that down to about 27,000. Another one I did, there was 2.8 million rows, and I got that down to 1.3 million rows. So I have been through my fair share of that. Get on the website. I've got a YouTube channel as well. I have so much more content planned for this year, including some online training courses. If any of you have, your companies have a Pluralsight membership, I've just had a course launched on there as well. Oh my goodness, teachers, they should know better. That's terrible. No, as a new analyst, you are not the problem. You will soon find that everybody says it's a nightmare, or again, they won't admit it publicly, but they will behind closed doors or after they've had a drink. Someone else has got issues with multiple different locations of files and making reports. Someone likes Tableau, that's great. Is anyone else using any other tools? Oh, the most beautiful data I've ever gotten to clean up. I love really messy normalized suppliers that have like .inc or comma space inc, limited, SA, incorporated. You get GmbH if you're in Germany. Making that clean is such a beautiful thing. And then I love massive data sets with lots of good keywords that you can search, like nuts, bolts, screws, paper, toner, rulers, pens, all that good stuff. I mean, I can, of 100,000 row data set, I could get 50,000 rows in a day easily just by some keyword searches. It's perfect. Love it. Canada event. Follow my LinkedIn and I will tell you more about it. I know we're just about coming up to time here. I'm trying to get through. My course is on Pluralsight at the moment, but I will be having some through my website when I've eventually built them. And yeah, Brenda says, setting common ontology taxonomy, how Walmart keeps data tidy. And that is so true. Again, I've got a whole other course on building a taxonomy. Again, if you're global, I've just done one for a global client. We call them chips here in the UK, but they're fries to most other places in the world. So you have to make sure your language is universally friendly. On that note, I will say thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
So thank you so much, Susan, for joining us today. Thank you for this lovely presentation. And thank you everyone for all your questions and interaction. And if you weren't able to get to your questions, feel free to connect with Susan on LinkedIn, and we'll also share our website and other links when we have the recording available. So thank you so much for joining. And we do have a webinar tomorrow. If you're interested, we'll have R and Python, the best of both worlds by Boyan Angelov, who's the Chief Technology Officer at WAM. So make sure to RSVP and join us tomorrow. Fatma will share the link. Please go ahead and RSVP for our upcoming webinars. And thank you everyone for joining today. Special thanks to Susan and also Fatma for arranging everything. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks everyone.